service today here at Woodlawn United Methodist Church as you join us online and on YouTube. You are a very special part of our community of faith, and we welcome you as we hear the words of the gospel according to St. Luke in the 6th chapter, verses 27 through 38. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your cloak, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. The reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. This is the word of life. Thanks be to God. A preacher friend of mine, Dr. Barbara Lundman, tells of the incident of many years ago passing a church in New York City. She was stopped at a red light and she looked over to the right, and there was the church sign announcing the sermon for the coming Sunday, which was posted in big letters. Following Jesus is loving and practical. She shares that she began to argue with that sign as she sat at that red light. She sat in that car arguing aloud to nobody but herself. I don't think so, she said. Following Jesus may be loving, but it's surely not very practical. And thus she began to list all of the impracticalities that are related to following Jesus. When the light turned and the car behind her honked its horn, she shared that she never got finished with that argument, but she wondered after that exactly what got said on that following Sunday morning from the pulpit. Now, as we read this scripture today, it would not be impractical of us to argue a little bit with it. If we're honest, we will do so. As we turn to this gospel reading in the chapter 6 of Luke, it clearly states that we're to, quote, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. That is practical, my friends. In what circles? If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer them the other cheek. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to them everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Come on. Let's be realistic. If someone takes away my goods, then I surely won't be able to give to anyone else who's going to beg from me. How do we make sense out of this? Do to others as you would have them do unto you. Well, that seems a little better, doesn't it? That sounds a lot more practical, like something you might see on a Hallmark greeting card. And yet, how does it work itself out in our everyday existence? Do to others as you would have them do to you. Now that makes sense. We know these words as what we call the golden rule. And they're not unique only to Judaism, Christianity. They're found in many of the world's religions. It's the kind of wisdom that we were all taught when we began our journey in kindergarten, when the teacher told us that we should treat people the way we would want to be treated. Now, sometimes in our minds, we'd like to boil down the Bible to one verse, just like that golden rule. After all, it's the verse. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It is a verse that we can understand, and it sounds very practical about getting along in the world. But I want to say to you today, it's impossible to boil down the Gospels or the rest of the Bible down to one verse, even if it seems the best of all possible verses. When we pull the golden rule out of its context as a summary of everything else Jesus has said, it's likely that we're going to miss most of what Jesus is saying here about love. He's saying, as we should understand it, as we go back to where Jesus began with these words, love your enemies. He says it not only once, but he repeats it again a few verses later. But love your enemies, do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. So, that golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, applies even when we sense that that other person isn't possibly going to treat us that way, the way we would like to be treated. Thus, is this practical? You see, this is where the carpet meets the floor. This kind of behavior is not only impractical, but it may seem downright dangerous. Jesus' words about turning the other cheek, giving your shirt along with your coat, seems very self-effacing and demeaning in the extreme. And it's probably the case that Jesus was speaking here to the very victims of these kinds of circumstances, rather than the victimizers, rather than those who were slapping the cheek and taking the coat and the shirt too, if they could get it. But I want to remind you this morning, Jesus wasn't calling the victims to roll over and play dead. It's very hard for us to see that this, for it sounds like Jesus is telling the victims to hush, to keep on taking it. Walter Wink, the great New Testament scholar, helps us see something far different from that, though. Working primarily with the Gospel according to St. Matthew's version of this story, but with the same insights that can be applied to Jesus' words here in Luke. He reminds us that, strange as it may seem to us, he can see Jesus' words as a form of nonviolent resistance in the midst of oppression. Now, this is very tricky, because we have to know something about the culture in which Jesus lived, in that culture of the first century Palestine. A person's left hand was used for what we might call bathroom functions. Now, I know it's not a very pleasant thing for us to think upon, but it meant that you never strike a person with your left hand. Never with the palm of your hand, for that would mean that you would see them as an equal. So now this is the picture Jesus is painting. If someone strikes you on the cheek, it will most likely be with the back of their hand. For remember, Jesus is talking to victims here. So your oppressor will not see you as an equal. That individual who is the perpetrator, who is the oppressor, he's likely to hit you with the back of his hand. And if you turn your face to the side, Wink reminds us, you force your oppressor to see you as his equal. Jesus wants us to see an almost comical situation here. You see, the oppressor's hand begins to swing, but it gets caught in midair because he doesn't want to treat you as an equal by hitting you with an open palm. So, Jesus is not telling people to remain victims. He's reminding us that through the power of love, when love prevails, evil gets resisted. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. This is disarming those who would oppress, those who would be perpetrators of evil. Now, I'm quite sure that those who heard this thought Jesus had lost his mind. After all, only violence can fight violence. But the authorities and the oppressors didn't know what to do with the kind of resistance that Jesus was talking about. They knew only the power of violence. They knew the powerlessness of victims who knew their place. But there was something here that they had not ever heard or seen before. Victims who refused to be victims. Victims who refused to fight back with violence. Victims who claimed their place not on the battlefield, not in the midst of aggression, but in the kingdom of righteousness. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. And don't be too impressed with yourself for being this way. Anybody can do good to your friends. Jesus says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? If you lend to those who lend to you, what credit is that to you? Just as we think we've got it all nailed down with that golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Jesus reminds us that it's far deeper than how we treat those who are nice to us. It's far deeper than what we hope to receive. It's even more different than treating others the way we hope to be treated. And Jesus brings us back. He brings us back to that place where he began. But love your enemies. Do good and lend expecting nothing in return. Do you remember Matthew Shepard? Do you remember about Matthew Shepard's mother? When Matthew Shepard was brutally beaten and hung up on a fence post to die, even as parking lot A was filling up with persons who prayed outside of his hospital room that he would be spared, even while he almost died from freezing to death, much less being beaten to death in the night. His mother, Judy Shepard, as hundreds stood in candlelight vigil outside of that hospital, and as the two men who had killed Matthew would be arrested and tried and convicted of their brutal hate against him, even as they were proved guilty of first-degree murder and in the state of Wyoming would have deserved the death penalty, Matthew's mother had already made the journey in her heart to the place where she could stand before the judge and plead with the judge to spare the lives of the two young men who took Matthew's life. Now, how could that mother lay her head on the pillow at night with the image of her beloved son tied to a fence post, beaten and freezing to death in the cold winter's night? What sort of a person could do what she did? Love your enemy. Do good to those who hate you. So when love prevails, then we, like Matthew Shepard's mother, have our hearts shaped in such a way that love prevails. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, may it be so.
rose of